Ethan sat on the floor of his room, his small hands carefully fitting together the last pieces of his favorite puzzle. The picture was of a bright red fire truck, and it was one he had completed many times before. But today, it felt different. The house was quieter than usual, and the sound of his mother's voice, once comforting and familiar, seemed distant, even when she was in the next room. "Ethan, lunch is ready," Sarah called from the kitchen. Her voice was warm, but carried a hint of tiredness that Ethan had begun to notice more often lately. He abandoned his puzzle and ran down the hallway, his feet making soft, thudding sounds on the wooden floor. The house wasn't big, but to a 6-year-old, it felt like a maze of wonders. In the kitchen, his older sister, Emily, was already at the table, twirling a strand of her long brown hair around her finger as she scrolled through a book. At 10, Emily was the smart one, at least that's what everyone said. She liked to read and often told Ethan stories about faraway places and magical creatures. But today, she was quiet, her eyes fixed on the pages in front of her. "Peanut butter and jelly again?" Ethan asked, a bit of a whine in his voice, as he looked at the sandwich on his plate. "It's your favorite, isn't it?" Sarah replied with a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She sat down across from her children, watching them eat. There was a pause, a silence that felt heavier than the usual lunchtime quiet. "Mom," Ethan began, looking up from his sandwich. "When's Dad coming to pick me up?" "Tomorrow, sweetie," Sarah answered, her voice softening. "He'll be here in the morning, and you'll spend the weekend with him, just like last time." Ethan nodded, but inside he felt a mix of emotions he couldn't quite put into words. He loved seeing his dad, but it was strange having to pack a bag and leave the house every other weekend. He missed how things used to be when they all lived together, and every day felt like a new adventure with both his parents around. After lunch, Ethan ran outside to the backyard, where his best friend Liam was waiting by the old oak tree. Liam was a year older, with messy blonde hair and a wide grin that made him look like he was always up to something. The boys had been friends since they could remember, spending countless hours playing in the yard, imagining they were pirates, superheroes, or explorers in a jungle. "Let's play hide and seek," Liam shouted as soon as he saw Ethan. Without waiting for a response, he covered his eyes and began counting loudly. 1, 2, 3. Ethan quickly looked around, spotting the perfect hiding place behind the big bushes near the fence. He crouched down, feeling the cool earth beneath his hands, and listened to Liam's voice as it counted higher and higher. For a moment, as he waited in his hiding spot, everything felt normal again. The world was just as it should be, full of games and laughter, with nothing to worry about. But as Liam's voice reached 10 and the game continued, Ethan's thoughts drifted back to his parents. He didn't fully understand why they couldn't live together anymore, why his dad had to move to a different house in another city. All he knew was that things had changed, and he didn't like it. After a few rounds of hide and seek, the boys flopped onto the grass, staring up at the sky. The clouds were big and fluffy, slowly drifting across the blue expanse. Ethan pointed to one that looked like a giant turtle, and Liam laughed, insisting it looked more like a dinosaur. "Do you think clouds have feelings?" Ethan asked suddenly, his voice thoughtful. Liam shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe. My dad says everything has feelings, even rocks." Ethan thought about this for a moment. If clouds had feelings, maybe they were lonely too, floating all by themselves up in the sky. He wondered if they ever wanted to come down and play with kids like him and Liam. The sun was starting to set when Sarah called Ethan inside. Liam waved goodbye and ran off to his own house, promising they would play again tomorrow. Ethan watched him go, feeling a pang of sadness. The day had been fun, but it was almost over, and tomorrow he would have to pack his bag and go to his dad's. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, he heard the faint sound of his mother talking on the phone. He couldn't make out the words, but her tone was soft, almost whispering. He knew she was talking to his dad, making plans for the weekend. Emily was already asleep in the next room, her steady breathing a comforting sound in the darkness. Ethan pulled the covers up to his chin, thinking about the weekend ahead. His dad had promised to take him to the park and maybe even to the zoo. But as exciting as that sounded, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that things would never be the same again. Before he drifted off to sleep, Ethan thought about the puzzle he had left unfinished in his room. Tomorrow he would finish it, piece by piece, just like he always did. But tonight all he could do was close his eyes and hope that someday everything would fit back together, just like the pieces of his puzzle. Ethan stood at the edge of the school playground, clutching his lunchbox tightly. The school year had just begun, and everything still felt new and a little scary. The playground was buzzing with energy. Kids were running, laughing, and shouting as they played tag, swung on the monkey bars, or tossed a ball around. But Ethan wasn't sure where he fit in yet. "Hey, Ethan," a voice called out, and Ethan turned to see Liam waving at him from the swings. Relieved, Ethan hurried over to his friend. Liam had been in a different class the year before, but this year they were together again. It was nice to have someone familiar around. They spent the rest of recess together, but as the bell rang and they headed back inside, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of nervousness in his stomach. He liked school, but there were parts of it that made him uneasy, like finding a place to sit in the cafeteria or figuring out how to deal with the older kids who sometimes pushed him around in the hallways. In class, Ethan sat near the back, his eyes wandering over the colorful posters on the walls. His teacher, Miss Anderson, was explaining something about the alphabet, but Ethan's mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the drawing he had started the night before, an elaborate picture of a dragon with fiery wings and sharp claws. He couldn't wait to get home and finish it. "Ethan, can you come up and write the next letter?" Miss Anderson's voice broke through his daydream. Ethan blinked and realized everyone was looking at him. His face turned red as he slowly got up from his seat and walked to the front of the room. He could feel his classmates' eyes on him, and his hands trembled slightly as he picked up the chalk. Carefully, he wrote the letter Uwe on the board, trying to ignore the giggles from a few kids in the back. "Good job, Ethan," Miss Anderson said with a smile. But as he returned to his seat, he couldn't help but feel like he had done something wrong. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and by the time the final bell rang, Ethan was ready to go home. When he got home, his mother, Sarah, was in the kitchen, humming a tune as she prepared dinner. Ethan dropped his backpack by the door and went to the table, where he saw a new face sitting beside his sister, Emily. "Ethan, this is Tom," Sarah said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Tom and I met a few months ago, and I thought it would be nice for you two to meet." Tom smiled at Ethan, but Ethan just stared at him. He was tall and had a kind face, but Ethan didn't like the way he was sitting at their table, in the spot where his dad used to sit. "Hi, Ethan," Tom said, his voice friendly. "Your mom's told me a lot about you. She says you're really good at drawing." Ethan nodded but didn't say anything. He didn't like talking to strangers, especially not ones who seemed too interested in his life. After dinner, Ethan went to his room, where his unfinished dragon drawing waited for him. He sat down at his small desk and picked up his colored pencils, trying to lose himself in his artwork. But his mind kept drifting back to Tom, sitting at their table, laughing with his mom and sister. It didn't feel right. As the weeks went by, Tom started coming over more often. He would join them for dinner, help Ethan with his homework, and even take them to the park on weekends. Ethan didn't know how to feel about it. Tom was nice enough, but every time he saw him, it reminded Ethan that his dad wasn't there. Meanwhile, at school, Ethan's days were filled with new challenges. He liked Miss Anderson, who always encouraged him to draw and praised his work. But not everyone at school was as kind. There was a group of older boys who liked to tease the younger kids, and Ethan often found himself the target of their jokes. One day, as Ethan was walking to the cafeteria, one of the boys, Tyler, blocked his path. Tyler was a year older, bigger, and always seemed to be looking for trouble. "Hey, Ethan, what's that in your hand?" Tyler sneered, pointing at the sketchbook Ethan always carried with him. "Nothing," Ethan mumbled, trying to move past him, but Tyler snatched the sketchbook out of his hands. "Let's see what you've got in here," Tyler said, flipping through the pages. Ethan's heart raced as he watched Tyler and his friends laugh at his drawings. They made fun of the way he drew the dragons, saying they looked like lizards. "Give it back!" Ethan shouted, feeling a surge of anger and embarrassment. But Tyler just pushed him away, making Ethan stumble. "Make me!" Tyler taunted, holding the sketchbook high above his head. Just then Liam appeared, pushing his way through the small crowd that had gathered. "Leave him alone, Tyler," Liam said, standing beside Ethan. His voice was steady, but Ethan could see the determination in his eyes. Tyler hesitated for a moment before throwing the sketchbook on the ground. "Whatever," he muttered, walking away with his friends. Ethan quickly picked up the sketchbook, his hands trembling. "Thanks," Ethan said quietly to Liam as they walked to the cafeteria together. He felt a mix of emotions, grateful to Liam, but also embarrassed that he hadn't been able to stand up for himself. After school, Ethan went straight to his room, wanting to forget the whole day. But as he looked at his sketchbook, he felt a strange sense of determination. He opened it and started drawing again, this time more fiercely than before. He wasn't going to let a bully like Tyler stop him from doing what he loved. That evening, Ethan's dad, Michael, called. Ethan hadn't seen him in a few weeks, and hearing his voice on the phone made him feel a little better. "How's my little artist doing?" Michael asked, his voice warm and full of pride. "Okay, I guess," Ethan replied, sitting on the floor with the phone pressed to his ear. "I'm drawing a new dragon. It's going to be the biggest one yet." "That's my boy," Michael said. "You keep at it, Ethan. Don't let anyone tell you different." Ethan smiled, feeling a little lighter. His dad always knew what to say, even from far away. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan started to adjust to the changes in his life. He still wasn't sure about Tom, and school was still full of ups and downs. But he had his art, and he had Liam. And even though his dad wasn't always there, Ethan knew he was still a big part of his life. Ethan stepped off the school bus and adjusted the strap of his backpack, feeling the weight of his textbooks pulling down on his shoulder. High school was nothing like he had imagined. It was bigger, louder, and more chaotic than middle school, with so many new faces that it sometimes felt like he was just another body in the crowd. He had been excited for the change, but now, 2 weeks into his freshman year, the excitement had faded into a mix of anxiety and uncertainty. The first thing he noticed as he walked through the school gates was how everyone seemed to have a place they belonged. The athletes hung out by the gym, the theater kids gathered near the auditorium, and the popular crowd always seemed to occupy the prime real estate in the cafeteria. Ethan wasn't sure where he fit in. He wasn't into sports, and while he liked drawing, he wasn't confident enough to join the art club. At least not yet. As he made his way to his locker, he spotted Olivia at the end of the hall. They had been in the same art class last year, and now they shared a few classes together, including English and, of course, art. Olivia had a way of making everything seem less intimidating. She was always smiling, with her short, curly hair framing her face, and a sketchbook tucked under her arm. "Hey, Ethan," she called out, waving as she approached. "How's your first couple of weeks going?" Ethan shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant. "It's okay, I guess. Just a lot to get used to." "Tell me about it," Olivia said with a laugh. "But at least we have art class together. I can't wait to see what projects Miss Peterson has for us this year." Ethan smiled, feeling a bit of the tension ease away. Art class was the one part of the day he looked forward to. Miss Peterson was known for encouraging creativity and letting her students explore their own styles. It was in her class that Ethan first started to feel like his drawings were more than just a hobby. They were a way to express himself. They walked to class together, chatting about the latest assignment, which involved creating a series of sketches based on a theme of their choice. Olivia had chosen nature, while Ethan was leaning toward mythical creatures. It was an idea he had been playing around with for a while, inspired by the dragons and fantastical beasts he had been drawing since he was a kid. As they entered the art room, Ethan noticed how calm it felt compared to the rest of the school. The walls were covered in student artwork, and the smell of paint and graphite filled the air. Ethan took his usual seat by the window, where the light was best, and started setting up his supplies. Miss Peterson began the class by showing examples of past students' work, talking about the different ways they had interpreted the theme. Ethan listened closely, feeling a spark of inspiration as she spoke. When it was time to start sketching, he lost himself in the process, letting his pencil glide across the paper as he brought his ideas to life. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and homework assignments, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of excitement that art class had sparked in him. He was already thinking about his next sketches, planning out the details in his mind. That evening, when he got home, the house felt emptier than usual. His sister Emily had left for college a few weeks ago, and her absence was still noticeable. Her room was just down the hall from his, but now the door was always closed, and the house was quieter without her music playing in the background, or her laughter echoing through the halls. Ethan dropped his backpack by the door and headed to the kitchen, where his mom, Sarah, was cooking dinner. She was trying a new recipe, Something with chicken and vegetables that smelled pretty good. "Hey, Mom," Ethan said, grabbing a soda from the fridge. "Hi, honey," Sarah replied, her voice cheerful. "How was school today?" "Fine," Ethan mumbled, taking a sip of his drink. He didn't feel like talking about school, not with the stress of fitting in and keeping up with his classes weighing on him. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, glancing at him as she stirred the pot on the stove. "Yeah, it's just school stuff, you know?" Ethan replied, trying to brush it off. He wasn't sure how to explain what he was feeling, like he was caught between wanting to be independent and still needing guidance. Sarah nodded, but Ethan could tell she wanted to ask more. She had been doing that a lot lately, trying to keep up with what was going on in his life. But it only made Ethan feel more distant. He loved his mom, but ever since Emily left for college, it felt like she was holding on to him even tighter, afraid of losing him too. Later that night, Ethan sat at his desk, working on his sketches. He had finished a drawing of a phoenix, its wings spread wide as it soared through the sky, flames trailing behind it. He stared at the drawing, feeling a sense of satisfaction mixed with a longing he couldn't quite explain. He missed Emily. She had always been the one he could talk to about anything, and now she was hours away, living a life he couldn't even imagine. He thought about calling his dad, Michael, but hesitated. Their relationship had become more distant over the years. Michael still called every weekend, and they spent time together during the holidays. But it wasn't the same. His dad always seemed preoccupied with work, and their conversations felt forced, like they were both trying too hard to connect. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan's life settled into a routine. He went to school, hung out with Olivia, and spent hours in his room drawing. But there was a restlessness inside him, a feeling that he was missing something important. One Friday afternoon after school, Olivia invited Ethan to her house. They had been talking about their art projects, and she wanted to show him a new technique she had learned for shading. Ethan agreed, glad for the distraction. Olivia's house was cozy, with warm colors and lots of family photos on the walls. Her parents were welcoming, and Olivia's younger brother Jake was running around the living room, pretending to be a superhero. It was a stark contrast to Ethan's quiet home, and he felt a pang of envy as he watched Olivia interact with her family. In Olivia's room, they sat on the floor with their sketchbooks, comparing notes and trying out different techniques. Olivia was working on a series of landscapes, each one more detailed and vibrant than the last. Ethan was impressed by her talent and found himself inspired to push his own work further. As the afternoon turned into evening, they talked about more than just art. Olivia shared stories about her family, her dreams of becoming an illustrator, and the pressures she felt at school. Ethan found it easy to open up to her, telling her about his struggles with his mom, his distant relationship with his dad, and the loneliness he felt since Emily had left. "I get it," Olivia said softly. "It's hard when everything's changing, and you're not sure where you fit in." Ethan nodded, grateful for her understanding. For the first time in a while, he didn't feel so alone. As the school year progressed, Ethan and Olivia grew closer. They spent more time together, both in and out of class, and their friendship became a source of comfort for Ethan. But with that closeness came new feelings that Ethan wasn't sure how to handle. He started to notice things about Olivia that he hadn't before. The way she laughed, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she was passionate about. It was confusing, and Ethan wasn't sure what to do with these new emotions. At the same time, the pressure of school was building. Midterms were approaching, and Ethan was struggling to keep up with his assignments. His grades were slipping, and the stress was starting to get to him. He found himself snapping at his mom more often, frustrated by her constant questions and attempts to help. One evening, after a particularly rough day at school, Ethan had a fight with his mom. It started over something small, her reminding him to do his homework, but quickly escalated into a full-blown argument. "You're always on my case, Mom," Ethan shouted, his voice echoing through the house. "I'm not a little kid anymore. I can handle my own life." Sarah looked hurt, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm just trying to help, Ethan. I know things have been tough for you lately, but I'm here for you." "I don't need your help," Ethan snapped, regretting the words as soon as they left his mouth. He turned and stormed out of the house, needing to get away from the suffocating tension. He ended up at the park, sitting on a bench by the swings. The cool evening air helped to calm him down, but the guilt lingered. He knew he had been unfair to his mom, but he didn't know how to fix it. Everything felt so overwhelming, and he wasn't sure how to navigate the emotions swirling inside him. As he sat there lost in thought, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Olivia. "Hey, you okay?" She always seemed to know when something was wrong. "Not really," he typed back, hesitating before sending the message. A moment later, his phone buzzed again. "Want to talk?" Ethan thought about it for a moment before replying, "Yeah, that'd be nice." They met at their usual spot the next day, a quiet corner of the library where they often hung out after school. Olivia didn't push him to talk, just sat with him, flipping through a book as he sorted through his thoughts. "I fought with my mom last night," Ethan finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Olivia looked up, her eyes full of concern. "What happened?" "I don't know," Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Everything's changing, and I feel like I'm losing control. I took it out on her, and now I feel terrible." Olivia reached out and placed a hand on his arm, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed, Ethan. High school is tough, and it's normal to feel like you're drowning sometimes, but you don't have to go through it alone." Ethan nodded, grateful for her support. Talking to Olivia made him feel a little better, like a weight had been lifted off his chest. He knew he needed to apologize to his mom, but he wasn't sure how to start. That night, Ethan sat down with his sketchbook, hoping to clear his mind. He started a new drawing, a picture of a knight standing on a cliff, looking out over a stormy sea. The knight looked strong, determined, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Ethan worked on the drawing, he thought about his own struggles and how he could face them. The next morning, before leaving for school, Ethan found his mom in the kitchen. She was making breakfast, the smell of pancakes filling the air. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "Mom, I'm sorry about last night," Ethan said, his voice sincere. "I didn't mean what I said. I know you're just trying to help." Sarah turned to him, her eyes softening. "I'm sorry too, Ethan. I know I've been hovering, but it's only because I care about you." They stood there for a moment, the tension between them easing. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. As Ethan left for school, he felt a little lighter, like he was finally starting to find his way through the maze of adolescence. Ethan stared at the blank canvas in front of him, the clean white surface both inviting and intimidating. It was his final project for art class, and he knew that whatever he painted here would be a reflection of everything he had learned over the past few years. But as he picked up his brush, he found himself hesitating. The future loomed large in his mind, and for the first time he felt truly uncertain about what path to take. It was the beginning of his senior year, and everywhere he looked, there were reminders that the end of high school was approaching fast. His classmates were buzzing with talk of college applications, SAT scores, and career plans. Ethan had always assumed he would go to college like his sister Emily had, but now that the time was near, he wasn't so sure. Art had become more than just a hobby for him. It was a passion, a way of expressing the emotions he couldn't put into words. But was it enough to build a future on? His mind was a whirl of questions, and the pressure to make the right decision felt overwhelming. "Ethan, you okay?" Olivia's voice broke through his thoughts. She was sitting next to him in the art room, her own canvas already half covered in vibrant colors. "Yeah, I'm just thinking," Ethan replied, putting down his brush and rubbing his temples. "About college?" Olivia guessed, her tone sympathetic. "Yeah," Ethan admitted. "It's just, everyone seems to know what they're doing, and I'm stuck here. Not even sure if I want to go to college at all." Olivia nodded, understanding. "I get it. I mean, I love art too, but it's scary to think about making it into a career. My parents keep telling me to choose something practical, but I can't imagine doing anything else." Ethan's eyed, staring at the blank canvas again. "What if we end up at different schools? Or what if I don't go to college at all?" Olivia paused, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "I'd miss you, Ethan, but I think you need to do what's right for you. If art is your passion, you should follow it. The rest will work itself out." Ethan appreciated her words, but the doubt still lingered. That evening, as he sat at the dinner table with his mom, the topic of college came up again. It had become a frequent discussion in their house, and tonight was no different. "Have you thought any more about where you want to apply?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Not really, Ethan replied, poking at his food. I'm just not sure if college is the right path for me. Sarah put down her fork and looked at him carefully. Ethan, I want you to know that whatever you choose, I'll support you. If you want to go to college, that's great. But if you want to pursue your art in a different way, that's okay too. Ethan looked up, surprised by her response. You'd really be okay with that? Sarah smiled. Of course. I've seen how much art means to you. It's a part of who you are. And I don't want you to lose that, just because it's not the traditional path. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude. His mom had always been his biggest supporter, even when he wasn't sure what he wanted for himself. But the decision still weighed heavily on him. A few days later, Ethan received a call from his dad, Michael. It had been a while since they'd spoken, and the conversation started off awkwardly, as it often did, but Michael seemed determined to reconnect, and after some small talk, he brought up the topic that had been on Ethan's mind. So what's the plan for next year? Michael asked, trying to sound casual. Ethan hesitated, not sure how to explain his doubts. I'm still figuring it out. I'm thinking about art school, but I don't know if it's the right choice. Michael was quiet for a moment before he replied, You know, Ethan, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, especially when it comes to being there for you. But one thing I've learned is that you have to follow your passion. If art is what makes you happy, you should go for it. Ethan was taken aback by his father's words. Michael had always been more focused on practical matters, and hearing him speak so openly about following a passion was unexpected. But what if it doesn't work out? Ethan asked, voicing one of his biggest fears. Nothing in life is guaranteed, Michael said, his tone serious. But if you don't take the risk, you'll always wonder what could have been. And I don't want you to live with that kind of regret. Ethan thought about his dad's words long after they hung up. It was rare for them to have such a meaningful conversation, and it left Ethan feeling both comforted and more confused than ever. As the weeks passed, Ethan continued to wrestle with his decision. He spent more time in the art room, working on his final project and talking things over with Olivia. They both knew that the end of high school meant big changes, and the uncertainty of what came next was always in the back of their minds. One day after school, Olivia invited Ethan to her favorite spot in the nearby woods, a quiet clearing by a small stream. They had been there before, but this time the air was thick with unspoken feelings. I'm scared, Ethan, Olivia admitted as they sat on a fallen log. I'm scared of what happens after graduation. I don't want to lose what we have. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. I'm scared too, he confessed. But I think we have to trust that everything will work out, even if it's not how we expect. Olivia looked at him, her eyes full of uncertainty. Do you really believe that? Ethan nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure if he was convincing himself or her. Yeah, I do. We'll figure it out. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the stream filling the air. Finally, Ethan turned to Olivia, his heart pounding. I've decided, he said quietly. Olivia's eyes widened. You have? Ethan nodded. I'm going to apply to art school. I don't know if I'll get in, but I have to try. I can't imagine doing anything else. Olivia smiled, relief washing over her face. I'm glad, Ethan. I think it's the right choice for you. That night, Ethan told his mom about his decision. Sarah was thrilled, hugging him tightly and telling him how proud she was. The next day, he called his dad and shared the news. Michael's voice was full of pride as he encouraged Ethan to go after his dreams. The final months of high school flew by in a whirlwind of applications, final exams, and bittersweet goodbyes. Ethan and Olivia spent as much time together as they could, knowing that soon their paths might diverge. But they promised to stay in touch no matter what. As graduation day approached, Ethan felt a mix of excitement and fear. He had been accepted to his top choice art school, and the future that had once seemed so uncertain was now taking shape. But with that clarity came the realization that everything was about to change. On the day of graduation, as Ethan stood in his cap and gown, surrounded by his classmates, he felt a surge of emotion. He had made it through the ups and downs of high school, and now he was ready to step into the next chapter of his life. After the ceremony, Ethan found his mom and dad waiting for him, both beaming with pride. They took pictures, hugged, and shared a moment of happiness that felt long overdue. The morning air was crisp and cool as Ethan stood in his bedroom, looking around at the walls that had witnessed the many phases of his life. The shelves were empty, the posters had been taken down, and the once cluttered desk now sat bare, except for a single sketchbook and a few pencils. It was the last morning he would wake up in this room, in this house, and the realization felt both exhilarating and bittersweet. Downstairs, the smell of pancakes drifted through the house, a familiar comfort on what was otherwise an unfamiliar day. Ethan took a deep breath and made his way to the kitchen, where his mom, Sarah, was flipping pancakes on the griddle. "Morning, honey," she said with a warm smile, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes. I thought it would be nice to have one last breakfast together before you head out." "Thanks, Mom," Ethan replied, taking a seat at the table. The kitchen, like the rest of the house, was filled with memories, countless meals, late-night conversations, and moments of laughter that had shaped his childhood. As he ate, Ethan's mind wandered back over the years. He thought about the little boy he had been, playing in the yard with Liam, drawing dragons in his sketchbook, and trying to make sense of a world that was constantly changing. He thought about the awkward middle school years, the challenges of high school, and the friendships that had helped him through it all. And now here he was on the brink of something entirely new. His mom joined him at the table, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice soft. "I'm so proud of you, Ethan. I know I've said it 100 times, but I want you to know that no matter what, I'm here for you. I'm going to miss having you around the house." Ethan looked at his mom, feeling a surge of emotion. "I'm going to miss you too, Mom, but I'm excited, you know? It feels like the right time to move on, to see what's out there." Sarah nodded, blinking back tears. "You're going to do great things, Ethan. I just know it." After breakfast, Ethan finished packing the last of his things. His dad, Michael, arrived shortly after, ready to help load the car. It was strange seeing his parents together, both of them working side by side to make sure everything was ready for his departure. They had come a long way since the early days of their separation, and while they were no longer married, they had found a way to be at peace with each other, especially when it came to their children. "Are you sure you've got everything?" Michael asked as he hefted a box into the trunk of the car. "Yeah, I think so," Ethan replied, doing a final check of his bags. "Thanks for helping, Dad." "Of course," Michael said, giving Ethan a proud smile. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." With the car packed and everything in place, it was time to say goodbye. Ethan's heart felt heavy as he hugged his mom, the reality of leaving hitting him all at once. "Call me when you get there, okay?" Sarah said, holding him tight. "I will," Ethan promised, his voice thick with emotion. He hugged his dad next, feeling the strength in his father's arms. "Take care of yourself, son," Michael said. "And remember, we're just a phone call away if you need anything." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. "Thanks, Dad. I'll keep in touch." Finally, it was time to go. Ethan climbed into the driver's seat, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He started the car and took one last look at the house, at his parents standing together on the driveway, waving as he pulled away. It was a moment he knew he would remember for the rest of his life. The drive to the art school was long, but it gave Ethan plenty of time to think. He had said goodbye to Olivia the day before, a tearful parting that had left him feeling both hopeful and sad. They had promised to stay in touch, to visit each other whenever they could, but they both knew that the future was uncertain. Still, Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude for the time they had shared and the friendship that had meant so much to him. As the miles rolled by, Ethan's thoughts turned to the future. He had spent so much time worrying about what path to take, but now that he was on his way, he felt a growing sense of confidence. The lessons he had learned over the years, from the challenges of childhood to the struggles of adolescence, had prepared him for this moment. He wasn't the same boy who had felt lost and unsure. He was stronger, more resilient, and ready to face whatever came next. When Ethan finally arrived at the campus, he felt a surge of excitement. The art school was everything he had hoped for, an inspiring environment filled with creative energy and like-minded people. As he walked through the gates, he felt a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt anywhere else. His dorm room was small but cozy, with a window that looked out over the campus. As he unpacked his things and set up his space, Ethan felt a wave of contentment. This was his new home, the place where he would start the next chapter of his life. That evening, as the sun set over the campus, Ethan sat by the window with his sketchbook. He started to draw, letting the pencil glide over the paper as he captured the beauty of the moment. The scene outside was peaceful, a perfect reflection of the calm he felt inside. As he sketched, Ethan thought about everything that had led him to this point: the challenges, the friendships, the moments of doubt, and the flashes of inspiration. He realized how much he had grown and changed, how far he had come from the little boy who had once struggled to find his place in the world. Now, as he looked out at the future, he felt a sense of excitement and possibility. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt, but Ethan knew he was ready for them. He had learned to trust himself, to follow his passion, and to embrace the journey wherever it might lead. With a final stroke of his pencil, Ethan completed the drawing and sat back, a smile spreading across his face. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of promise. And as he prepared to step into adulthood, Ethan felt ready to face the challenges, to chase his dreams, and to make his mark on the world. The story of his childhood and teenage years had been one of growth, discovery, and finding his own path. Now, as he turned the page to the next chapter, Ethan knew that the best was yet to come.